Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, wealth remains just beyond your reach? What if I told you that financial abundance isn't something you pursue, but something you assume? Tonight I share with you the one discovery that changed everything. I tried countless millionaire manifestation methods, affirmations, vision boards, endless techniques, but none brought lasting results. Until I realized the secret was never in the methods themselves, but in the state I dared to assume as my own. I recall the time when I was struggling, much like many of you. I desired wealth, abundance, the freedom to live as I pleased. I tried every method, affirmations, visualizations, even scripting, but nothing seemed to last. My reality remained unchanged. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, I abandoned all effort. I asked myself, what would it feel like to already be a millionaire? I allowed that feeling to envelop me, not as a distant hope, but as a present reality. I felt the weight of financial ease. I imagined writing checks without hesitation, walking through life with an effortless assurance that money was always available. And then something remarkable happened. I woke up the next morning and the world felt different. Not because it had changed, but because I had changed. I no longer thought of wealth as something separate from me. I knew it was already mine. Within days, unexpected opportunities appeared. Clients sought me out. Money came in ways I had never anticipated. But these were not coincidences. They were reflections of my new state. You see, wealth is not attracted, it is embodied. The moment you assume the state of financial abundance, your world reshapes itself to match that assumption. The phone rings with offers, the right people appear, doors that were once closed swing wide open. But here is where most fail. They assume the feeling for a moment, only to return to doubt. The key is persistence. Remain faithful to the state of already having, even when the senses suggest otherwise. When you refuse to acknowledge lack, lack ceases to exist. I am telling you from experience, this is not theory but fact. Assume yourself to be wealthy, and you will become it, not by force, not by struggle, but by being the one who already possesses what they seek. Dare to believe, and you will witness the impossible become inevitable. The world you see is nothing more than the outpicturing of your inner consciousness. What you hold within, you see without. The external reality which so many attempt to change through effort, struggle, and action is but a shadow cast by the thoughts and assumptions you entertain in the silence of your mind. It is imagination that shapes the world, not effort, not force, but the unseen power of assumption. A man may toil endlessly, seeking to amass wealth through effort alone, believing that his actions alone will alter his state. Yet, if his inner conviction remains one of lack, no labor will ever free him from it. He will always return to what he truly believes himself to be. The poor man, even when given wealth, will find a way to squander it if his inner self still clings to poverty. The rich man, even when stripped of all possessions, will rise again, for his wealth is not in his hands, but in his consciousness. Imagination is the source of all creation. Every building, every invention, every fortune amassed first began as an idea, a vision within the mind of one who dared to assume it real. There is no creation in the external world that was not first imagined. The great fortunes of the world were not stumbled upon, they were assumed into existence. The same law applies to all things, whether one seeks wealth, love, or success. The world is an obedient servant to the master who knows how to command it, not through force, but through inner conviction. A man does not receive what he wants, he receives what he is. If he sees himself as one who struggles for money, then struggle will be his experience. If he sees himself as one who barely makes ends meet, his life will be a series of financial limitations. Yet the one who assumes himself to be wealthy, even when there is no physical proof, sets into motion unseen forces that conspire to bring him the reality he inwardly accepts as true. The senses will always seek to confirm what the mind assumes. Look around and you will see this law in operation. The one who constantly speaks of failure experiences failure. The one who identifies with sickness is plagued by it. The one who walks through life expecting rejection finds it at every turn. They are not victims of chance, but participants in a law that does not waver. And just as it works to confirm lack and limitation, so too will it work to confirm abundance, if only one dares to assume it. The secret lies in living from the wish fulfilled. To imagine wealth as something to be attained in the future is to forever push it beyond reach. To long for riches is to confess their absence. Yet, to assume oneself already in possession of financial abundance, to think, feel, and act from that state, is to invite the world to reflect that assumption in perfect detail. The mind must be disciplined to accept only that which is desirable. The inner conversation must match the desired reality, for words spoken within are more powerful than words spoken without. One must ask, what would it feel like if I were already the person I desire to be? That feeling is the key. It is not idle fantasy, but the very substance that brings the unseen into form. The moment one fully accepts the reality of the wish fulfilled, it begins to externalize. There is no need to know how it will come to pass, for the means are not the concern of the one who imagines. Life itself will arrange the necessary conditions, people, and opportunities to make the assumption real. Doubt is the only enemy. To waver between belief and disbelief is to plant a seed only to uproot it before it can take root. Many begin to assume a new state but falter when the senses offer no immediate confirmation. They peer anxiously at the world, searching for proof, and in their impatience they undo the very work they have begun. To assume a state is to persist in it, regardless of appearances. The one who knows this does not waver, for he understands that the external must conform in due time. Faith is not passive. It is the most powerful force in existence. It is the inner certainty that what is imagined is already fact. The moment one assumes a state and lives from it, he has already received it in consciousness. And as surely as night follows day, it will manifest in form. Nothing can prevent the realization of an assumption maintained with unwavering faith. The world will always reflect back the sum total of one's inner conversations and beliefs. Change must come from within. The transformation of external conditions is the natural consequence of an inward shift. The mind that is disciplined to assume the best will see only the best materialized. There is no exception to this law, no circumstance that can override it. The only question is whether one will use it wisely or allow it to operate unconsciously, shaping a life of limitation. Wealth, success, and freedom are not achieved through effort alone, but through an inner transformation that makes them inevitable. The disciplined imagination is the true source of all fortune. Those who understand this will no longer seek wealth, but will assume it. And in doing so will find that the world has no choice but to comply. The law of assumption is the key to financial abundance. For the world you experience is nothing more than the outpicturing of your deeply held beliefs. What you assume to be true, whether consciously or unconsciously, will manifest in your life with absolute certainty. Wealth is not something to be pursued, nor is it something that exists outside of you. It is a state of being, a consciousness that must be assumed before it can ever materialize in form. To assume wealth is to take upon yourself the feeling of already being wealthy, to move through the world with the inner knowing that what is desired is already yours. Man has been conditioned to believe that wealth comes through hard work, sacrifice, and external effort. He has been taught that money must be earned through struggle, that success is granted only to a select few, and that abundance is the result of external conditions. Yet these are but illusions, reinforced by those who have not yet awakened to the power of assumption. The truth is that wealth is not determined by effort, nor is it dictated by the world outside. It is shaped entirely by the state one occupies within. To assume the state of wealth is to claim it as present fact, and in doing so, life must rearrange itself to reflect that assumption. A man may toil endlessly, chasing after financial freedom with great effort, only to find himself exhausted and no closer to his goal. Another, possessing nothing but the conviction of already being wealthy, will soon see his world reshape itself to match that inner certainty. The difference is not in the actions taken, but in the consciousness assumed. The law of assumption is absolute. What you accept as true within must be confirmed without. To assume poverty is to live in poverty, just as to assume wealth is to live in wealth. The senses deceive those who rely on them. To look at one's bank account and declare lack is to affirm lack. To measure financial standing by the visible world is to be ruled by effect rather than cause. The cause of all wealth lies within, in the invisible realm of imagination. The moment one stops reacting to the evidence of the senses and begins to accept wealth as an internal reality, the outer world must shift in accordance with that inner acceptance. It is law, unwavering and precise. To assume wealth is not to wish for it, nor is it to daydream about a future where it may come to pass. Wishing implies separation. It acknowledges that what is desired is not yet attained. The law of assumption requires that one move beyond longing and into possession. It demands that one embody the feeling of already being financially abundant, to live and think from the state of wealth rather than toward it. When one assumes wealth with unwavering conviction, he does not act in desperation or seek external validation, for he knows that what he has accepted within must express itself in due time. The great mistake is to believe that one must wait for evidence before assuming the state. Those who say, "I will feel wealthy when I have money," will never possess it, for they place effect before cause. It is the feeling of wealth that creates wealth, not the other way around. One must act as if, think as if, and feel as if the desired reality is already here, regardless of external circumstances. This is not deception, nor is it pretense. It is the creative process by which all things come into being. There is no need to force the manifestation of wealth, for assumption is effortless. It does not require strain, nor does it demand external proof. The one who truly assumes the state of wealth finds that he naturally begins to think, speak, and act in accordance with that assumption. He no longer indulges in conversations of lack, nor does he entertain thoughts of struggle. He sees money as something that flows freely without limitation, for this is the reality he has chosen to accept. The outer world, obedient to the law, begins to reflect this shift in consciousness. Doubt is the only hindrance. The one who assumes wealth but then looks anxiously for signs of it will find that his doubt overrides his assumption. He must persist, unwavering in his conviction, refusing to accept anything less than the reality he has claimed. The assumption must be lived, not tested. There is no need to wonder when wealth will come or how it will appear. These questions belong to those who have not yet accepted their new state. The one who truly assumes need not concern himself with such things, for he knows that his assumption is already fact. There is no special technique, no ritual required beyond the willingness to accept the truth of one's desired state. A man who wishes to be wealthy must abandon all thoughts of lack and step fully into the consciousness of abundance. He must think from the position of wealth rather than about it. He must no longer see himself as one striving for money, but as one who already possesses it. Every thought, every inner conversation must align with this assumption, for what is dominantly assumed will inevitably become reality. Wealth is not something to be earned, it is something to be accepted. Those who struggle for it do so because they believe in struggle. Those who assume it effortlessly receive it effortlessly. The difference is not in external conditions, but in the state of consciousness. The law of assumption is precise. It does not grant exceptions. It does not fail. What is assumed with conviction must externalize, for the outer world is but a mirror reflecting the inner state. The question is not whether the law works, but whether one will use it wisely. Man has been conditioned to believe that money, success, and abundance are things to be pursued. He chases wealth as if it were an object separate from himself, something that exists outside of him and must be obtained through labor, struggle, or luck. Yet this belief is a falsehood, for nothing in this world exists outside of consciousness. The wealth that seems so distant is not a thing to be sought, but a state to be assumed. Desire, when misunderstood, becomes a force of separation. The man who longs for riches only affirms that he does not have them. The more he chases, the further it retreats, for he has placed his goal in a future that never arrives. He sees himself as one who is striving toward financial freedom, but by doing so, he unknowingly reinforces the idea that he is not yet free. The biggest idea on the idea of not reinforcing the idea that he is not yet free. The very act of seeking denies possession. The law is absolute. What you assume is true becomes your reality. The moment you stop seeking and start being, everything shifts. Instead of chasing money, you assume the consciousness of one who already possesses it. You abandon the idea that wealth is something outside of you, something that must be attracted, and instead accept it as your present reality. You do not need to earn the right to be wealthy, nor do you need permission from the world to claim what is yours. The only requirement is that you accept yourself as already having that which you desire. This is where so many fail. They attempt to use the law while still holding on to the belief that they must acquire, attract, or achieve. They look at their bank accounts, their circumstances, and their history, and they allow these illusions to dictate their assumption. But the truth is that the external world is always an effect, never a cause. The cause of wealth, success, and freedom exists solely within consciousness. When a man stops seeking and starts being, he no longer sees money as something distant. He no longer speaks of what he wants. He speaks from what he has. His inner conversations change. He does not think in terms of waiting for financial freedom, but in terms of already living in it. He does not dream of one day being successful. He moves through life as one who is already successful. This shift is subtle yet profound, for it is the key that unlocks all doors. Imagination is the means by which this transformation takes place. If one were already wealthy, how would he feel? How would he think, speak, and act? What would his inner dialogue be? These questions are not to be answered in theory, but to be lived in practice. If one assumes the state of wealth with full conviction, he will find that his world begins to shift to reflect that assumption. People, opportunities, and circumstances will arrange themselves to align with his new state. There is no need to concern oneself with how these changes will come to pass. The mind, when left undisciplined, seeks to control the process, but this is not its role. The only task is to remain faithful to the state assumed. When a man truly stops seeking and starts being, he no longer questions, doubts, or wonders when his desire will manifest. He knows that it already has. He is not waiting for proof because he does not need it. He is already in possession of his goal in consciousness, and therefore it must become visible in form. It is only when one assumes lack that lack persists. The one who constantly affirms that he is struggling will continue to struggle. The one who speaks of his inability to make money will always find himself in financial limitation. This is not because of external forces, but because of an inner agreement with those conditions. No man can experience that which he does not first accept as true. The one who assumes wealth, regardless of appearances, will soon find himself surrounded by the evidence of that assumption. To stop seeking is to rest in the certainty that all is already accomplished. It is to move from effort to effortless being, from striving to receiving. The external world is a mere shadow of the inner state. And when that inner state is shifted, the shadow must follow. The belief that one must work harder, struggle more, or fight for financial success is an illusion born out of ignorance of the law. The truth is that assumption creates reality, and that which is assumed with full conviction will manifest with certainty. Every great fortune, every empire, every success story began with an assumption. No man ever built wealth while seeing himself as poor. No man ever rose to power while doubting his own authority. It was never action alone that created prosperity. It was the inner state that preceded it. Wealth was first accepted within, before it could be seen without. The moment a man assumes himself to be financially abundant, the world has no choice but to confirm that assumption. There is no need to seek what is already yours. Simply accept it. Walk through life as the one you wish to be, and the world will mirror your conviction. Stop searching, stop questioning, and start being. Wealth is not a pursuit, it is a state of mind. Those who understand this cease to struggle, for they know that what they have claimed within must become visible without. The world you experience is nothing more than the reflection of your inner assumptions. What you persistently believe about yourself and your financial condition is precisely what your external reality will confirm. There is no accident in the circumstances you find yourself in, nor is there an external force determining whether you live in wealth or poverty. The only determining factor is the state you occupy in consciousness. Every man moves through life wrapped in the feeling of being someone. He may see himself as wealthy, successful, and free, or he may see himself as struggling, limited, and in lack. But regardless of what he outwardly claims, his true state is revealed by his circumstances. The law does not respond to empty words or fleeting wishes. It responds to the conviction of being. If a man deeply believes he is struggling, no effort, no amount of work, and no opportunity will override that inner belief. His world will only reflect his state, for the external can be nothing more than an outpicturing of the internal. If one desires wealth, he must first assume the state of being wealthy. He cannot hope, wish, or beg for it, for these acts imply separation. To assume is to take upon oneself the feeling of already being that which is desired. It is not to pretend, nor is it to deceive oneself. It is to claim ownership of that state as an unquestionable fact. He must think, act, and feel as the one who already possesses financial freedom, for assumption is the only force that shapes reality. Many believe they must first see evidence before they can assume, but this is an inversion of the law. The senses will always reflect the dominant assumption, but they cannot lead, only follow. If a man insists on waiting for wealth to appear before he feels wealthy, he will remain in a state of waiting indefinitely. But if he assumes himself already in possession of wealth, the world must by law reorganize itself to mirror that assumption. There is no exception to this principle, for what one accepts as true in the depths of his being must externalize. This is why many who work tirelessly to improve their financial situation find themselves in a cycle of struggle. They take endless action while still believing they are poor, and so the harder they work, the more struggle they create. The external world is never the source, it is the result. It is not effort that produces wealth, but the assumption of already possessing it. The one who deeply accepts that he is wealthy, even when there is no visible proof, will find himself naturally moved into circumstances that confirm his belief. He will take inspired action, meet the right people, and encounter the right opportunities, not because he forced them, but because his assumption dictated them. The process is effortless, for assumption is not about struggle, it is about acceptance. One does not become wealthy through force, but through alignment with the state of wealth. The moment he fully accepts this state as his own, all effort ceases. He no longer questions, doubts, or waits. He simply lives in the end, knowing that what he has assumed is already so. This is not wishful thinking. It is the creative process by which all things are brought into being. Doubt is the only enemy. The man who assumes wealth but constantly checks for signs of it in the external world will undo his own work. He will assume in one moment and deny in the next, and in doing so he will remain in limbo. Assumption must be steadfast, unwavering. It must become the foundation upon which all thoughts rest. If a man truly assumes, he does not look to the world for confirmation. He looks within and knows that the world must follow. This is not a technique, it is a law. It does not require rituals or affirmations spoken without belief. It only requires that one accept the truth of his desired state and refuse to entertain any thought to the contrary. If one wishes to be financially free, he must discard all thoughts of struggle and limitation. He must abandon every inner conversation that affirms lack and replace it with the inner knowing of abundance. His dominant thoughts must be in harmony with his assumption, for what one thinks about himself is what he will inevitably experience. Many ask, how long will it take for my assumption to become reality? But this question reveals that they have not yet truly assumed the state. The one who has fully claimed his desire does not concern himself with time, for he knows that what is real within must become real without. He does not wait. He lives from the end, secure in the knowledge that his assumption is already fact. He does not seek evidence. He understands that the world will adjust itself accordingly. The law does not fail. It is as precise as the law of gravity. The only variable is man's ability to assume and persist in his assumption. If he wavers, his results will waver. If he fully commits, his reality must conform. There is no condition, no circumstance, and no limitation that can override this law. Wealth is not something to be earned or pursued. It is a state to be assumed. The moment one ceases to seek and instead fully embodies the consciousness of already being financially abundant, the world has no choice but to mirror that truth. The world moves in response to the assumptions you hold. Every moment, knowingly or unknowingly, you are impressing upon the subconscious mind a state of being, and that state inevitably takes form in the world around you. There is no separation between you and your experience. The conditions of your life are not accidents, nor are they dictated by external forces. They are merely the projections of the inner state you persist in assuming. To transform your financial reality, you must first transform the way you see yourself. No man can experience wealth while holding on to an inner conviction of lack. It is not possible to assume poverty in consciousness and expect abundance to appear. The law does not work in fragments. It does not grant you what you want, but only what you are. If you persist in seeing yourself as someone struggling to make ends meet, life will faithfully confirm that assumption. If you assume yourself to be financially secure, regardless of outer circumstances, life will be equally faithful in proving that assumption true. There is no force outside of you determining your financial condition. Money does not flow to those who work the hardest, nor does it avoid those who are unworthy. It simply follows assumption. Wealth is a state of consciousness, not an external possession. The one who assumes himself to be wealthy will find money coming to him through the most natural means, without strain or struggle. He does not chase after it, for he understands that all things are drawn to the state one occupies within. This is why effort alone does not create financial success. The world is filled with those who toil endlessly, yet remain in lack. They believe that hard work is the cause of wealth, but they do not realize that it is assumption that dictates all outcome. If a man labors with a conviction that he must struggle, his efforts will only reinforce his state of struggle. His long hours and sacrifices will not bring him freedom, for he has already accepted bondage as his truth. But another, working with the inner knowing that he is already wealthy, will find his efforts multiplied, his opportunities abundant, and his success inevitable. The difference is not in the actions taken, but in the consciousness assumed. You do not need to force wealth to appear. The moment you assume yourself to be financially free, the world will begin to shift in ways beyond your comprehension. You will be led to ideas, people, and opportunities that align with your state. This is not luck, nor is it coincidence. It is the law in action. The assumption of wealth naturally aligns you with the means of its expression. You do not need to know how it will unfold. You only need to persist in the inner conviction that it already has. Many fall into the trap of looking to the world for evidence before they assume their wealth. They say, I will feel rich once I have money. But this is the inversion of the law. The outer world is a mirror. It cannot produce anything that is not first assumed within. The one who insists on waiting for physical proof will wait indefinitely, for he has placed effect before cause. It is only when he assumes his wealth in consciousness, without waiting for confirmation, that the mirror of life will reflect it back to him. The key is to remain unwavering in assumption. If you assume wealth, but then look at your current circumstances and allow doubt to creep in, you undo your own work. You must persist in the conviction that you are already financially abundant, even when everything around you suggests otherwise. This is not self-deception. It is the only way creation occurs. You do not manifest by reacting to what is. You manifest by assuming what will be as already existing. The senses will attempt to convince you otherwise, but they are merely reflections of past assumptions. Change the assumption, and the reflection must change as well. Your inner dialogue must align with your assumption. The one who truly accepts wealth as his reality does not speak words of lack. He does not dwell on financial difficulties, nor does he engage in conversations of struggle. He does not question when or how his wealth will appear, for he knows that it is already his. He moves through life with the quiet certainty that all his needs are met, that money flows to him effortlessly, that opportunities arise in his favor. And because he has assumed this state as true, life must organize itself to reflect that truth. There is no need to strive, no need to force, no need to convince. The law works with absolute precision. What you accept as true within must be confirmed without. If you desire financial freedom, assume that you already have it. Dwell in the feeling of being secure, abundant, and prosperous. Think from wealth rather than toward it. Walk as one who already possesses all that he desires, and the world will reshape itself to match your assumption. There is no exception, no limitation, only the certainty that what is assumed with full conviction must externalize. Everything that man experiences is a direct reflection of his internal state. The world is not separate from him, nor is it something to be manipulated externally. It is an outpicturing of his assumptions, responding with absolute fidelity to the beliefs he holds about himself. If he believes himself to be wealthy, the world will prove that assumption true. If he sees himself as struggling, no amount of effort will free him from the very state he has unconsciously accepted. To manifest financial abundance, one must first assume the consciousness of wealth. This is not a passive wish nor a fleeting desire. It is a living, breathing state of being. It is not enough to think of wealth. One must think from wealth. There is an immeasurable difference between the two. To think of wealth is to place it at a distance, to acknowledge that one does not yet have it. But to think from wealth is to operate as one who already possesses it. It is to carry the conviction, the assurance, the inner knowing that financial abundance is not something to be attained. It is something that is already yours. Man is always assuming something. He does not recognize this, for he mistakenly believes that his assumptions are dictated by his external conditions. But in truth, the process works in reverse. It is not the world that shapes assumption. It is assumption that shapes the world. The wealth a man sees, the opportunities that arise, the money that flows into his life, all of it is the result of the state he has accepted as his reality. Many struggle with this idea because they insist that the physical world must first change before they can accept their new identity. They believe they must see financial evidence before they can believe they are wealthy. Yet this is an inversion of the law. The world is a mirror. It does not create, it only reflects. To demand evidence before assuming wealth is like waiting for a reflection in a mirror to change before altering one's expression. The change must first occur within, and only then will it be reflected without. When one assumes a new state, there is often a tendency to look for immediate confirmation in the outer world. If results do not appear instantly, doubt creeps in. This is where most fail, for they abandon their assumption too soon, returning to their previous state of lack. They waver between belief and disbelief, moving in and out of the very condition they wish to transcend. But the law is precise. It does not respond to fleeting wishes, but to persistent assumption. That which is truly accepted within will harden into fact, but only if one remains faithful to it. There is no force preventing wealth except the belief that it is absent. The one who sees himself as lacking money, who constantly affirms his financial struggles, who reacts to the world as though he is bound by limitations, unknowingly maintains the very conditions he wishes to escape. He does not recognize that he is the cause. He continues to assume limitation while expecting freedom to appear. Yet this is impossible, for assumption dictates experience. The only way to break free is to assume the state of financial abundance now, regardless of appearances. The question is not whether the assumption is true in the present moment. The question is whether it will be made true through belief. There is nothing in the world that was not first assumed. Every building, every invention, every great fortune began in the unseen realm of assumption before it became physical fact. There is no difference between the man who has millions and the man who has nothing except the state each has chosen to accept as his own. The law does not favor one over another. It responds to all with equal certainty. To assume wealth is not to pretend, nor is it to engage in mere positive thinking. It is to rest in the certainty that what is held in imagination must be made manifest. It is to embody the feeling of financial abundance so fully that it becomes second nature. This is not about forcing belief. It is about allowing the assumption to take root and grow into expression. If a man assumes himself to be wealthy with the same certainty that he assumes the sun will rise, he will find that wealth must inevitably appear in his world. The process is effortless when fully understood. The one who assumes wealth does not struggle to create opportunities. They are drawn to him. He does not chase after success. It is inevitable. He does not concern himself with when or how the money will come, for he knows that assumption is the only force that dictates experience. He moves through life as one who already possesses all that he desires, and because he does, the world must. Nothing stands between man and his wealth except his own consciousness. He need only shift his inner state, abandoning all thoughts of lack, releasing every belief that says wealth is distant or difficult. When he assumes the feeling of already being financially free, without contradiction, without doubt, and without waiting for proof, he will see that assumption harden into fact. The world has no choice but to reflect what is first claimed within. The entire structure of reality is shaped by the unseen forces of assumption. What a man believes himself to be, he inevitably becomes. He moves through life enclosed within the garment of his inner convictions, unaware that the world he calls reality is nothing more than his own reflection. The riches he seeks, the success he desires, the financial freedom he longs for, all exist within him now, awaiting recognition. There is no separation between man and his fortune, except the illusion that it is something to be attained rather than assumed. There is no power in effort alone. The world is filled with those who toil endlessly, yet remain bound by limitation. They chase after money, believing that through struggle, sacrifice, and external action, they will one day be free. But they do not realize that all movement originates from within. A man may work tirelessly for years, yet if he holds in his heart the conviction that he is financially constrained, his work will only reinforce that state. The condition of his life is not determined by how much he does, but by the assumptions from which he operates. Assumption is not wishful thinking. It is not an idle daydream or a momentary fantasy. It is the conscious acceptance of a state as real. The man who truly assumes wealth does not question, does not doubt, does not waver. He does not look at his current bank balance and let it dictate his state of mind. He does not allow the opinions of others to shake his belief. He walks in the conviction that he is already financially free, knowing that what is claimed in imagination must externalize in reality. Many believe they must first earn money before they can feel wealthy. They see wealth as something separate from themselves, something that must be pursued, accumulated, and protected. But this belief itself is the barrier that keeps financial freedom at a distance. For wealth is not a thing, it is a state of consciousness. It is not found in numbers or possessions, but in the deep-seated knowing that one already possesses all that he desires. When a man shifts his awareness from lack to abundance, he does not need to force circumstances to change. They change naturally, in perfect accordance with his inner transformation. The senses deceive. They show man the effects of his past assumptions and tempt him to believe in their permanence. But nothing is fixed, nothing is final, except that which he continues to assume. If he allows the world of facts to dictate his inner state, he remains trapped in a cycle of repetition. He looks at his financial situation, sees limitation, and reinforces it by accepting it as true. But if he refuses to let external conditions determine his inner world, and instead assumes the feeling of wealth in defiance of appearances, he sets into motion the unseen forces that must rearrange his life accordingly. There is no delay in manifestation except the delay created by doubt. The moment a man fully accepts a new state as true, without contradiction, his world begins to shift. He may not yet see the evidence, but the process is already underway. Like a seed planted in the soil, the assumption of wealth must grow and unfold in its perfect time. But if he digs up the seed each day, questioning whether it is taking root, he prevents its growth. He must persist in the assumption of financial abundance, refusing to entertain any thought that contradicts it. His inner conversations must align with his new state. He cannot assume wealth while speaking words of struggle. He cannot hold on to the feeling of abundance while constantly checking for signs of it. He must think, feel, and act as one who already possesses the fortune he desires, not as a performance, not as a forced effort, but as a natural, effortless state of being. When he does this, he will find that circumstances align in ways he could not have planned. Ideas will come to him, opportunities will present themselves, and people will appear in his life to aid him on his journey, not because he forced them to, but because they are drawn to the new state he has claimed. Money does not flow to those who chase it. It flows to those who assume it is already theirs. The man who believes in his own financial security does not seek confirmation from the outside world. He creates it from within. He does not concern himself with how or when the money will come, for he knows that the means are always arranged by the law. His only task is to remain faithful to the assumption, to persist in the feeling of already being financially free. The world must conform, for it has no power to do otherwise. All barriers, all limitations, all struggles are self-imposed. The only obstacle between man and his wealth is the belief that it is distant. The moment he discards this false idea and assumes his fortune as present, he will see that the world had been waiting to mirror his conviction all along. There is no effort required to attain wealth, only the willingness to assume it as already so. The riches of life are not given to those who strive for them, but to those who claim them as their own, here and now. The unseen reality of imagination is the only reality that shapes the world of man. His financial standing, the abundance or lack he experiences, and the opportunities that present themselves are mere reflections of his inner state. He does not earn wealth, he assumes it. He does not struggle for financial freedom, he embodies it. The great mistake of humanity is the belief that external conditions create internal states. But the truth is the reverse. Man's inner conviction dictates the circumstances he encounters. Money is not something separate from man, not something to be pursued, nor something to be worked for in toil and exhaustion. It is an expression, a shadow cast by the consciousness he holds. The one who assumes himself to be wealthy will find that money flows to him as naturally as the tide returns to the shore. He does not need to chase it. for it is drawn to him through the magnetic force of assumption. His wealth is inevitable because he has claimed it within. There is no virtue in struggle. The world is filled with those who work tirelessly, who sacrifice their time, who labor under the illusion that effort alone produces results. Yet, they remain bound by the very conditions they seek to escape. The truth is that their external toil only mirrors their internal struggle. A man who sees himself as lacking, no matter how hard he works, will find his labor yielding nothing more than confirmation of his assumption. The one who sees himself as wealthy, even before there is evidence to prove it, will find himself led into circumstances where his assumption hardens into fact. The world is not separate from the mind. It is not something to be conquered, but something to be aligned with. The man who understands this principle does not try to force his way to riches. He assumes the consciousness of wealth, knowing that the external world must take shape accordingly. If he assumes himself to be financially free, opportunities will arise, people will appear, and events will unfold in perfect sequence to bring about the confirmation of his inner state. He does not need to plot or plan. The law moves in ways beyond his comprehension, arranging all things in harmony with his conviction. Many attempt to manifest wealth while holding on to the belief that they are without it. They engage in affirmations, they visualize, they practice techniques, yet they fail to let go of the feeling of lack. They look at their bank accounts and allow numbers to dictate their emotions. They check for signs, and when none appear, they abandon their assumption. This is why they do not succeed, for they have not truly assumed the state. They have merely wished for it. Wishing is weak. It acknowledges the absence of the thing desired. Assumption is power, for it declares that what is imagined is already real. One does not need to know how wealth will appear. The means are never man's concern. His only task is to remain unwavering in his conviction that he is already what he seeks to be. The mind will attempt to interject, to question, to doubt, but these are only remnants of past conditioning. They hold no power except the power given to them. The disciplined man disregards all contrary evidence, knowing that the outer world is nothing more than a reflection of past assumptions. The moment he assumes something new, the process of its manifestation has already begun. It does not matter whether a man has nothing in his possession or whether he is surrounded by limitation. Circumstances do not define him, his assumption does. The man who sees himself as wealthy while standing in the midst of apparent lack is the one who will see his world transform. He does not ask when or how it will happen, for he knows that assumption is the only reality. He feels the relief, the security, the freedom of already possessing all that he desires. And because he assumes it without contradiction, it must appear. The law operates with mathematical certainty. Just as a reflection in a mirror must change when a man changes his expression, the outer world must shift when the inner world is altered. There is no exception. When a man assumes wealth as his truth, he does not need to force it into being. He simply watches as life rearranges itself to confirm what he has already accepted within. His belief is the cause, and his experience is the effect. If he remains faithful to his assumption, nothing can prevent its manifestation. All riches, all opportunities, all financial success already exists within. The only work required is the acceptance of this truth. The moment a man ceases to see himself as lacking and claims the wealth that is already his in consciousness, he will see it reflected in the world. He will not struggle. He will not chase. He will not seek validation from external conditions. He will simply assume, and by that assumption, he will experience the undeniable proof that imagination is the one and only reality. Man is never at the mercy of circumstances. He is the creator of his reality, shaping it through the assumptions he holds as true. Wealth, abundance, and financial freedom are not things to be pursued, but states to be assumed. The world merely reflects back to him what he has already accepted within himself. If he sees money as distant, it will remain beyond his reach. If he believes it is difficult to attain, he will struggle endlessly. But if he assumes himself to be wealthy, to be financially free, to be living in abundance now, without contradiction, the world must conform. His assumption is law, and the outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match his inner conviction. There is no power in struggle, no virtue in effort alone. The only true work is the work of the mind. The disciplined assumption of the desired state is already real. Those who understand this law do not chase after wealth. They do not plead, they do not wish. They assume, and by that assumption they receive. The world is a mirror, reflecting only what is first claimed in imagination. To be financially free, one must think from that freedom, not of it. To be wealthy, one must embody the feeling of already possessing wealth. This is the secret, the great truth that governs all experience. Wealth is not a matter of chance or effort. It is a matter of consciousness. Assume the state, persist in it unwaveringly, and let the world prove to you the unfailing power of imagination.